You know what's wild? There's an entire generation of people who turned "I'm a disaster" into a personality trait, and somehow made it adorable. And I'm not judging. I am one of them. I once posted, "Just burned my grilled cheese for the third time this week. Guess adulting isn't for me, lol," and got 47 likes. 47, from people who probably also can't adult properly. And that right there, that's not just a funny caption. That's a cultural phenomenon. That is, millennials doing what we do best, being vulnerable, being self-aware, being kind of a mess, and then somehow turning it into community. So today we are going all the way in on this. We're talking about millennial self-deprecation, vulnerability signaling, and the secret community cues that hold this whole generation together. Because trust me, once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Let's start at the very beginning. Self-deprecation is not new. Humans have been making fun of themselves since the dawn of time. There's probably a cave painting somewhere that basically says, "Me bad at hunting, Big Mammoth laughed at me." But millennials, people born roughly between 1981 and 1996, we took self-deprecation and turned it into an art form, a coping mechanism, a love language, a branding strategy, sometimes all four at once. And the reason why is actually really fascinating, and also a little heartbreaking, and also kind of beautiful. It's complicated, much like a millennial's relationship with their student loans. Here's the thing nobody talks about enough. Millennials grew up being told they were special. Every trophy, every participation ribbon, every "you can be anything you want" speech from a guidance counselor who definitely didn't know what a housing market crash looked like. We were set up with sky-high expectations, and then reality showed up. The 2008 financial crisis hit when the oldest millennials were just entering the workforce and the youngest were in middle school. It was like someone handed you a map to a treasure and then told you, "Oh, by the way, the treasure was actually debt this whole time. Surprise!" And instead of crumbling under that weight, well, some of us did crumble a little. But also, we started laughing at ourselves, at the situation, at the entire absurdity of being told to pull yourself up by your bootstraps when you can't even afford boots. That laughter, that's where self-deprecation was born for this generation. So here's where it gets really interesting. Self-deprecation is one thing. But millennials didn't just make jokes about themselves in private, we broadcast them, loudly, on the internet, to strangers. And that's a whole different psychological game. Psychologists actually have a term for this. It's called vulnerability signaling. And before you go, "Smarty pants," hear me out because this is actually super relatable. Vulnerability signaling is basically when you share something personal, embarrassing, or emotionally raw, not necessarily because you need help, but because you're testing the social waters. You're saying, "A, I'm imperfect. Are you imperfect too? Can we be imperfect together?" It's like the social equivalent of leaving your apartment door slightly open to see if your neighbor will come by with snacks. And for millennials, this became almost instinctual. Because here's the secret. When you're the generation that was expected to have it all together, and you don't have it all together, the most radical thing you can do is just say that out loud. "I have no idea what I'm doing," said every millennial in a work meeting ever. "I cried in a Trader Joe's parking lot today." A statement that, when posted online, will get at least 200 sympathetic comments from people who have also cried in a Trader Joe's parking lot. "I'm 32, and I still don't know how to talk to my doctor like an adult." And suddenly you're getting DMs from strangers saying, "OMG me too." That connection, that "OMG me too," that is the entire engine of millennial online culture, and it runs on vulnerability. Now let's talk about the community cues, because this is where it gets genuinely fascinating. Every community has its own language, its own inside jokes, its own handshakes, metaphorical and sometimes literal. And the millennial community is no different. Except our handshake is quoting The Office at each other or saying, "Adulting is hard," and watching someone visibly relax because they know they're among their people. Community cues are signals you send, usually through humor, references, or shared vulnerability, that basically say, "I am one of you. You are safe with me. We are the same flavor of exhausted." Let me give you some real examples, and I promise you will recognize every single one of these. Cue number 1. The "I can't even" deflection. Someone compliments you, genuinely, says, "Wow, you handled that really well," or "You look great today." And what does a millennial do? They do not say, "Thank you." They say, "Oh my God, I literally almost forgot to put on pants this morning. I can't even." Why? Because accepting a compliment feels dangerous, feels like you're setting up expectations you might not meet. So instead you deflect with self-deprecation. You make yourself small before someone else can. It's a defense mechanism wrapped in a joke, and the other millennial in the room, they get it. They laugh. Not because it's funny. Well, it is a little funny. But because they've done the exact same thing 17 times this week, that shared recognition. That's a community cue working perfectly. Cue number 2, weaponized relatability. I'm such a mess, lol. I literally cannot function before coffee. My anxiety said no today. These aren't just complaints. These are invitations. They're someone throwing out a rope and hoping someone else grabs it. And in millennial culture, you grab the rope. You say same. You say honestly mood. You say, why are you describing my entire Tuesday? This is how millennials build intimacy really fast. You skip the small talk. You go straight to, here's something slightly embarrassing about me. And suddenly you're bonded. You're a team. You're in the group chat now. It's like emotional speed dating. And millennials are champions at it. Cue number 3, the collective lament. We really thought we'd have it figured out by now, huh? Oh, that hits different, doesn't it? That one line, that single sentence, that contains multitudes. Because embedded in that joke is the broken promise of upward mobility, the student loan crisis, the housing crisis, the we did everything right and it still didn't work out crisis, and a sense of humor about all of it. And when a millennial says that, in a comment, in a group chat, at a family dinner when their aunt asks why they haven't bought a house yet, every other millennial in the vicinity does a little internal nod, a yes, this person is my people. The collective lament is self-deprecation at scale. It's a whole generation saying, we're all in on the joke, and the joke is our socioeconomic reality. Bleak? A little. Hilarious? Somehow, yes. Now here's something I want to stop and point out because it's important. There is a difference between genuine self-deprecation and performed self-deprecation. Genuine self-deprecation is when you're actually processing something, when you're making a joke about your anxiety because laughing at it makes it less scary. When you post, I definitely cried watching a dog commercial today because it's true and honestly, you feel better saying it. Performed self-deprecation, sometimes called vulnerability performance, is when you lean into it so hard that it becomes a brand, a character, a way of getting likes and validation by performing messiness you may or may not actually feel. And here's where it gets tricky. Sometimes even the person doing it can't tell the difference, because the line between this is how I cope and this is how I get attention is genuinely blurry. Humans are complicated. Millennials are extra complicated. But here's what's interesting. Even the performance of vulnerability serves a community function. Even if someone is exaggerating their chaos for content, the people watching go, yep, relatable. And that shared moment of recognition, it still does something real. It still connects people. It still makes someone feel less alone at 2 a.m. So like, is it manipulation or is it community building? The answer is yes. Let's talk about why this works so well specifically for millennials and not quite the same way for other generations. Boomers, generally speaking, were raised with a don't show weakness mentality. You don't air your dirty laundry. You keep it together in public. You figure it out privately. Vulnerability was weakness. Gen X, the cool older cousins, had their own version of this. Cynicism and irony were their armor. They made fun of everything, but in more of a nothing matters, and that's fine way. Less I'm a mess, please love me, and more everything is absurd, don't look at me. And Gen Z, our younger siblings in chaos, they flipped it. They're almost aggressively open about mental health, identity, all of it. They'll make a TikTok about their therapy session in real time. Beautiful, unhinged, efficient. But millennials, we're in this middle zone. We were the first generation to grow up with the internet, but we remember before it. We had the expectation of traditional success, but lived through the crash of those expectations. We were taught vulnerability was weakness, but then the internet showed us vulnerability could be connection. So we developed this very specific flavor, self-deprecating humor as a bridge, a way to be vulnerable without seeming too vulnerable, a way to say I'm not okay. While technically just making a joke about your inability to do laundry, it's like emotional code switching, and we're fluent in it. Here's a real-life example that I think perfectly captures all of this. Think about the adulting meme era. Remember, adulting is hard. That phrase took over the internet around 2013 to 2016. Coffee mugs, t-shirts, Instagram captions everywhere. On the surface, it's just a funny way of saying being a grown-up is difficult. But look deeper. What was actually happening? Millennials were in their mid to late 20s, supposedly full adults. But they were. Living paycheck to paycheck, despite degrees, they were still paying for working jobs that had nothing to do with what they studied. Watching their parents' generation act like this was normal, while also not understanding why they couldn't afford a house. Dealing with anxiety and burnout, but without the vocabulary or cultural permission to talk about it directly. So instead of saying all that, which is scary and vulnerable and might invite someone to call you entitled, you say, "Adulting is hard, LOL," and put it on a mug. And every millennial who sees that mug in a Target aisle goes, "Yes, this mug is speaking to my soul. This mug understands me." That's the community cue in action, the shared code, the inside joke with an entire generation. There's another layer here that I think is deeply underrated, and that's the role of humor as a survival tool. Comedians have known this forever. Humor is how humans process pain. It's literally neurological. Laughter releases endorphins, reduces cortisol, helps the brain file away difficult experiences into manageable rather than catastrophic. Millennials, as a generation, have used self-deprecating humor as collective trauma processing. And I don't use the word trauma lightly. The economic instability, the political anxiety, the climate dread, the perpetual feeling of being behind some invisible schedule that someone else set. That's a lot to carry. And we carry it by making memes about it. By texting, "LOL, I'm fine, I'm not fine," to our friends. By writing Twitter threads about the absurdity of being alive right now. It's not avoidance. Well, sometimes it's a little avoidance, but mostly it's alchemy. Taking something heavy and turning it into something lighter. Something you can share. Something that makes other people feel less alone in their own heavy things. That's not weakness. That's genuinely beautiful, actually. Let's get into some more community cues because I know you're loving these. Cue number 4. The overshare is trust building. This one is so specific to millennials. We will tell you our whole psychological history within 45 minutes of meeting you if we feel safe. So I have anxiety, probably from some childhood stuff. I've been in therapy on and off. I have abandonment issues, but I'm working on it. And the other millennial doesn't flinch. They go, "Oh my God, same. My therapist says I have anxious attachment, and I've been catastrophizing since middle school." And suddenly you're best friends. You've bypassed all the surface stuff and gone straight to the real stuff. Because millennials learned from the internet, from therapy culture, from just surviving, that real connection requires real honesty. The overshare is a test and an invitation. Here is something real about me. If you're still here, we can be real together. Cue number 5, the humble chaos brag. I somehow landed this amazing opportunity even though I literally Googled how to act professional this morning. I have no idea how my life is going this well when I still can't remember to take my vitamins. My boss called me organized. My boss does not know about the chaos inside my head. This is self-deprecation that actually contains success, but it's packaged in a way that doesn't feel intimidating or braggy. You're celebrating something while simultaneously reassuring everyone around you that you're still one of them, still chaotic, still relatable, still, fundamentally, a mess, just a mess who got lucky. It's social intelligence disguised as self-mockery, and it's brilliant. Cue number 6. The "we don't talk about our feelings, we make memes about them" agreement. Millennials built an entire emotional vocabulary out of memes. Feeling overwhelmed. There's a meme for that. Feeling unexpectedly sad about something small? Meme. Existential dread at 3 a.m.? Multiple memes. Sending someone a meme instead of saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about you," or "This reminded me of our shared pain." That is the emotional communication. The meme is the hug. And the receiving millennial knows this. They know when their friend sends them a meme about being tired all the time, that friend is saying, "I see you. I'm also exhausted. We're in this together." It's a love language. I'm not even being dramatic. It is literally a love language. Here's something I want to address before we wrap up, because it would be a disservice not to. The self-deprecation, the vulnerability signaling, the chaos as personality. It's not all healthy. Sometimes it tips into genuinely negative self-talk disguised as humor. Sometimes "haha, I'm such a mess" is actually someone slowly convincing themselves they are a mess and that that's just who they are. Sometimes the vulnerability performance means you're getting external validation in place of actually processing what you're feeling. The healthiest version of millennial self-deprecation is when the humor is the vehicle for connection, not the destination. When the joke opens the door to a real conversation. When saying, "I'm struggling LOL," leads to someone actually asking, "Wait, are you okay?" and you actually answering honestly. The loop should be humor to connection to real support, not just humor to likes to more humor forever. And the good news is, millennials are also the generation that normalized therapy, that started saying setting boundaries in casual conversation without embarrassment, that introduced emotional intelligence as a workplace value. So we're clearly evolving. We're learning how to take the vulnerability all the way, not just as a signal, but as a practice. Let's bring it all home. Because here's the thing about millennial self-deprecation, vulnerability signaling, and community cues that I think is genuinely profound. It was never just about being funny. It was about building community in an era that felt increasingly disconnected. It was about finding your people when traditional structures, stable careers, geographic communities, religious institutions were no longer reliable gathering places. When you make a joke about your student loans and someone laughs, you've just found someone who gets it. When you say, "I'm fine," in a way that means you're not fine and someone clocks that immediately, you've just found a safe person. When you send a meme at 11 p.m. and get one back immediately, you're not alone in whatever you're sitting with tonight. That's the whole game. That's the whole thing. Self-deprecation as a radar, vulnerability as a magnet, community cues as a secret language that says, "You belong here. Me too. We're okay." And in a world that has given millennials a lot of reasons to feel not okay, that little signal, that shared laugh, that "OM same," it matters more than it looks like it does. It always did. All right, before you go, yes, I see you already hovering over the next video. I just want to say, if any part of this felt like you were watching a documentary about your own group chat, your own Instagram captions, your own coping mechanisms wrapped in humor, good. That was the point. Because you are not alone in this. Not even a little bit. There's an entire generation of people making grilled cheese jokes and crying in parking lots and sending memes as love letters and somehow building the most weirdly intimate community the world has ever seen. And if that's not worth celebrating, I honestly don't know what is. Now, if this video made you feel seen, or laugh, or do that thing where you text a specific friend immediately because they need to see this, please hit that button. It genuinely helps more people find this content, and honestly, it makes the algorithm do a little happy dance, and so do I. And if you want more videos about the psychology of how we connect, how we cope, how we're all somehow figuring this out together, one chaotic meme at a time, then subscribe. Hit that bell. Become part of this community, which I promise is warm, funny, a little unhinged, and will absolutely make you feel less alone. New videos drop every week, and I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to hydrate, take your meds if you take meds, and remember, being a little bit of a mess is not a character flaw. It's basically just being human. Bye for now.